Hello colleagues, and welcome to Week 0, Unit 2 of SAP Cloud Platform Version Control with Git. In this unit, I will explain the target audience for the course and share what I will be covering each week. The main target audience of the course is developers who are using the Web IDE who haven't mastered Git. Maybe you've been using SAP Web IDE for some time, and there's some aspects of Git that you have never used or that you've used but you don't completely understand them. Or maybe you have only a little bit of Git experience and you're now using SAP Web IDE for the first time. You might even be completely new to Git and don't understand anything about it. And you know that since Web IDE is the way to do SAP Cloud Platform development, you're eventually going to have to learn Git. Either way, this course is for you. In this first group of people could also be Scrum Masters or product owners whose teams are using Web IDE. Because Git will affect your release strategy and your product backlog, it would be useful for you to understand Git. Again, this course is for you. Now, a secondary audience for this course would be developers who have already mastered Git before coming to Web IDE. Perhaps you've used Git bash extensively, but you aren't sure what Git commands you've used correspond to which actions in Web IDE. Because you already have a gut level understanding of how to use Git, this course is going to be easier for you and take less time, but by the time you finish taking it, you will know how to use the Web IDE to fully harness all your pre-existing Git expertise. Now, as we've already said, the focus of this course is a deep, gut-level understanding of Git functionality exposed by Web IDE. For example, we won't just cover how to rebase. Instead, we're going to also cover precisely what a rebase is, what the advantages and disadvantages of rebasing are, when you should and shouldn't use it, and the different options you should consider once you've decided to rebase. Because of this, for most of the course demos, I very strongly recommend that you attempt to follow along with me in the examples. You can either pause the demo videos and follow the exact steps as I perform them, or if you prefer, you can watch the whole thing and attempt to do the same thing I did independently. This way, the knowledge you gain won't be theoretical, it will be practical and hands-on, and you won't forget it. In Unit 4 of this week, we will get you set up with free accounts on SAP Cloud Platform and Git so that you can follow along. Week 0, as we've already said, is for basic introduction and course setup. Weeks 1 through 3 are the real essence of the course. Of the 3 essential weeks, Week 1 is going to be the easiest week of the course. I think of Week 1 as crawling, Week 2 as walking, and Week 3 as running. Week 1 covers basics, starting with the most important concept in the course. What is distributed version control, and how is it different from centralized version control that most developers have experience with? We then will cover various cloning strategies, because even though cloning is a slightly advanced topic, it nearly always is the first thing you need to do when starting off using Git. Then we will cover the staging area, committing, branches, and tags. Now, even though Week 1 is the basics, in my experience in teaching this material, I've seen that when colleagues get confused on more of the advanced Git topics, it's usually because they didn't take the time to really understand the basics of Git. So pay attention to Week 1 because there are several things about Git that may be different from other version control systems you've used. If you understand these basics well, you will be set up for success in the rest of the course. Now, if Week 0 is crawling, then Week 1 is walking. Once you have decided to develop on multiple branches, which is basically always the case, Week 2 covers the various strategies for combining development work from multiple branches. Fast-forward merging, three-way merging, rebasing, hard resets, mixed resets, and cherry picking. You will understand not only how to do these things using Web IDE, but when and why you would choose to do them. Best of all, we will begin to cover how to combine these various tools in order to troubleshoot more complex scenarios you may encounter with Git. After the crawling week 0 and the walking week 1, you'll move on to week 3, which is what I think of as running. With the exception of cloning, covered briefly at the beginning of week 1, for the entire course up to this point, all the tools we've used were only working with a single local repository. Week 3 will show the simple set of commands that, when combined with the tools from the other weeks, give Git its real power. We'll first talk about the tricky topic of remote branches and how to think about pushing and fetching. We will then have a few practical sessions in which we work on using our tools from week 2 with remote branches. Finally, we will cover workflows. Workflows are different Git strategies that an entire software development team could use to develop their code, combining all tools from our previous sessions. While there are probably hundreds of different specific Git workflows for the hundreds of differing needs for different software development teams, we will cover 3 or 4 common ones to give your team a starting point for strategically leveraging Git's power. By the end of week 3, you should be able to handle complex scenarios using Git. If your team has chosen a given workflow strategy and a colleague comes to you for help because he or she has used Git incorrectly, you should be able to save the day for your colleague. Week 4 will conclude with a final exam. Now, a large minority of Web IDE Git users use Git with a popular code review tool called Gerrit. Because it wasn't fair to the majority of Web IDE Git users who do not use Gerrit to require them to understand Gerrit concepts, I didn't want to include Gerrit in the required material for the course. But because so many Web IDE Git users will be interested in how to use Gerrit, I wanted to provide them the basics for understanding the tool. So there are 3 bonus lectures that cover how to use Gerrit in week 4. Gerrit is a large enough topic that it could probably involve an entire course of its own. So these 3 lectures won't be exhaustive. For example, they won't cover up how to set up a Gerrit instance in your enterprise, or the myriads of settings that your enterprise could use in setting it up. But if you are a developer whose organization is already using Gerrit, these lectures will give you a solid understanding of how Gerrit works so that you can use it effectively. At this point, you probably have a pretty good understanding of what this course covers. But in case there's any confusion, I wanted to be clear about what this course does not cover in depth. First, this is not a course on UI5 development, even though in the past UI5 development was the main point of the Web IDE. UI5 development knowledge is also not a prerequisite for this course. I've designed the examples in the course so that you don't have to develop using UI5 unless you choose to. This course also doesn't cover Git Bash. As we'll see in the next lecture, Git Bash is the command line interface to Git that provides Git with the most options. If you want to master Git Bash, there are several free excellent tutorials online, and I've provided some links to some of my personal favorites. We will be using a free GitHub account in the examples of this course, so GitHub will be hovering in the background of everything we do in most lectures. But GitHub expertise is not directly covered by the course, and neither is Bitbucket, Atlassian's GitHub alternative. Finally, I wanted this course to have little or no knowledge that is purely academic, so we won't be covering what the Git community calls the plumbing. You won't learn how Git represents your development objects using so-called blobs, for example. As I mentioned, we will cover Gerrit, but it won't be on the final. If you want to be an effective Gerrit user, this course will give you what you need to know. So, here's a few links to other OpenSAP courses that cover material related to the course. Also, with the release of the new full stack Web IDE, more and more cloud platform development will be supported by Web IDE and therefore will require Git knowledge. So you can expect to see more and more courses related to the knowledge presented by this course in the future. I now invite you to join me in the next unit to get a broad picture of different terms and tools in the Git community. After the next unit, you will learn a little Git history, understand what the term Git really means and how to differentiate it from other terms such as GitHub, Git Bash, Web IDE Git, and Gerrit.